Hello, and welcome to the Poetry Peacast. I'm Patricia, and this is a podcast devoted to Japanese short-form poetry in the English language. Today, we're beginning a series on something that's been on my mind for quite some time: the difference between haiku and senryu. This is just part one of our, shall we say, most recent senryu journey. In this episode, I'll be reading a number of senryu written in different styles. Now, to understand senryu, one might feel tempted to begin with its history. But you don't need to worry. We've done that, and I'm not going to go back there, but I'll just guide you towards what I've already covered in an essay I've written, and also in Series 7 of the Poetry Peacast, and there will be links in the show notes. Instead, this week you'll hear from poets both bygone and more recent, and we'll sample senryu from Japan's pre- and postmodern canon, in English obviously, as well as contemporary English language examples. Full citations will be in the essay that accompanies this series. And just a little warning, some of what you might hear may surprise and even trouble you. Let's start off by hearing from Jane Reichold, who is writing in modern haiku. Thanks to the instant connectedness that the internet brings us, even the most obscure concepts and ideas leap from continent to landmass, heart to mind, within days. The availability of email puts our desks anywhere on the globe next to each other. In this new atmosphere of closeness, I'd like to ask all the editors of haiku magazines, paper and online, and the officers of haiku groups, as well as writers who love haiku, to reconsider their stand on senryu. We need to reevaluate the history and current situation of senryu, and to make clear how we're going to go forward in regard to its relationship to haiku. And in the conclusion of her article, she says, none of the old haiku masters of Japan wrote senryu. Why do we still drag senryu into our haiku community? For those of you who wish to support and promote senryu, I feel you have an obligation to consider with all seriousness how you can create a form or typographical arrangement that instantly signals that the poem is not a haiku, but is intended to be a senryu. For too long, you've hidden under the skirts of haiku writers and caused confusion and misunderstanding. That was back in 2013, and yet the debate continues. Should we separate haiku from senryu? And if so, how are we going to define the senryu? I thought we might start by looking at some senryu and seeing if we can't come a little closer to what they are and what they might become. Many poets writing in the field of English language Japanese forms have been taught that the senryu is a humorous poem, requiring neither a seasonal word, an element of nature, nor a cutting word. And it's true, senryu can be funny. Setting out in a straw hat, he must be going to his native place. Setting out in a straw hat, he must be going to his native place. Shiki, translated by Blythe. Wherever you are, there must be a town or a place where folks are seen in a derogatory way. A place where you think of the locals as country bumpkins, or worse. My hometown being just one of those, if I'm honest. If you'd like to know what I'm on about, Google the Croydon facelift. Anyway, let's move on. Till the rain lets up, he haggles over the price of an umbrella. Till the rain lets up, he haggles over the price of an umbrella. Anonymous, translated by Ueda. Anniversary gift, filling her old sweater with new cleavage. Anniversary gift, filling her old sweater with new cleavage. Carol Raisfeld. And I found that in Simply Haiku. Bagpipers, just far enough away to move me. Bagpipers, just far enough away to move me. And that was by Debbie Strange, and it was shortlisted for the 2018 H. Jean Murta Senryu contest. And I think you can see in this one, or here, that the wordplay, there is a wordplay on the word move. Bagpipers, just far enough away to move me. So, like I said, Senryu can be humorous. They don't require a season, they don't require a link to nature, and they don't need a cut. But Senryu can be so much more than humorous. In his preface to Senryu Japanese Satirical Verses, which happily you can find online at the Haiku Foundation Digital Library, Blythe says of Senryu that they are a criticism of life, expressions of moments of vision into not the nature of things, but the nature of man, suggesting, at least to me, that Senryu are more than whimsy or tomfoolery. More recently, Dinah Cox has said that these poems, the Senryu that is, make penetrating observations on the nature of man and the world. I think maybe she might have added, and his world. Anyway, observations of the world can of course be humorous, but they can be wry, satiric, crude, offer us an insight into human nature, including our sexual exploits, cruelty, and thoughtlessness. They can highlight the imperfections and disappointments of life. We can share our tragedies, and we can comment on social, societal, and political matters. So let's hear some poetry that illustrate these observations, and I'll start with some that offer us a psychological insight into human nature. The young widow is unwillingly fascinated by her child. The young widow is unwillingly fascinated by her child. Anonymous, translated by Blythe, who suggests that here we're seeing a young widow on the lookout for an eligible bachelor. Yet, she needs something to love. It's an innate need. And so, she's unwillingly drawn to her child. I'm not sure I can get with that explanation, because my head understands what he's saying. But as a mother, my heart doesn't really comprehend this notion. To make herself look good, she's given the maid a hairdo as fancy as her own. To make herself look good, she's given the maid a hairdo as fancy as her own. Anonymous, translated by Ueda. The young lady sees her maid as an adornment to herself, a status symbol, and so it's in her interest to make her maid look as good as possible. These next two surely require no explanation. Promotion pending. I light my boss's cigarette. Promotion pending. I light my boss's cigarette. Stephen Toft. From Simply Haiku. With all her might, the spurned woman throws the wedding rice. With all her might, the spurned woman throws the wedding rice. Alexis Rotella. Also from Simply Haiku. As I mentioned, Senryu has, for centuries, concerned itself with sexual matters. After her orgasm, silver dust floating in sunlight. After her orgasm, silver dust floating in sunlight. That's Mark Gilbert from the Poetry P Journal 222. As are the next couple of poems. Desire, down, down the path, until the leaves flutter. Desire, down, down the path, until the leaves flutter. And that's Colette Kern. G marks the spot. Armed with a map, he still misses the turning. G marks the spot. Armed with a map, he still misses the turning. By Tracy Davidson. Now, sometimes the Senryu can be a bit crude, although I guess, like many things, levels of crudity are opinions. And you could disagree with me suggesting that these next few poems illustrate crudity in the Senryu form. Good morning. My dick, an exclamation mark. Good morning. My dick, an exclamation mark. Mark Brimble. Also from Poetry P. Saying the sprouts would have no effect. Talking out of his arse. Saying the sprouts would have no effect. Talking out of his arse. Herb Tate. Another from Poetry P Journal 222. When we studied vulgarity, as you might be able to tell. When we're deep in the minutiae of everyday life, sometimes it's difficult to see and express humour. Senryu allows us as poets to use a full range of human qualities and moods to express what it is to be human, including impropriety, cruelty to ourselves and others, and of course tragedy. A filial daughter and an unfilial son, sleeping side by side. A filial daughter and an unfilial son, sleeping side by side. Anonymous, translated by Ueda. If you want to die, die, the daughter says cruelly. If you want to die, die, the daughter says cruelly. Anonymous, translated by Blythe. Father's Day. She calls me a sperm donor. Father's Day. She calls me a sperm donor. By Jonathan Roman from Prune Juice, issue 43. Freshly cut rose. She uses the same scissors along her scarred thigh. Freshly cut rose. She uses the same scissors along her scarred thigh. Eve Castle from Poetry P Journal 222. I decide to leave the hostile women's group. Beached whale. I decide to leave the hostile women's group. Beached whale. Janet Ruth Heller. The girl past her prime takes in pupils on the koto. The girl past her prime takes in pupils on the koto. Anonymous, translated by Blythe. In my day, the koto, which is something like a harp or a zither, would be the piano. The girl would take in pupils on the piano. Anyway, that makes me sound terribly, terribly old. And to end this little section, one I find absolutely heartbreaking. The stepchild, all day long, with his nose running. The stepchild, all day long, with his nose running. Anonymous, translated by Blythe. As I previously said, the Senryu deals with the imperfections and disappointments of life, often being disrespectful or irreverent. Weapon of the wife with no parent to go back to. A well. Weapon of the wife with no parent to go back to. A well. Anonymous, translated by Ueda. A day of poor business. A tax collector comes in first. A day of poor business. A tax collector comes in first. Jinrin, translated by Blythe. That poor person truly was having a bad day of business. Imagine the tax collector, the first one in. A few minutes late, he has nothing to eat but leeks. A few minutes late, he has nothing to eat but leeks. Anonymous, translated by Ueda. That one takes me back to my university halls of residence dining room. Self-service. So if you were late, you were definitely only getting leeks. Now that I'm over my bad mood, she's in one. Now that I'm over my bad mood, she's in one. Tom Clausen, from Simply Haiku. Seagull. Another romance marred by random shit. Seagull. Another romance marred by random shit. Bob Lucky. Prune Juice Journal, issue 46. Decades in the same house. Now I'm the fixer-upper. Decades in the same house. Now I'm the fixer-upper. Kurt Wallish. From Failed Haiku. The last category of senryu I wish to illustrate is one that's becoming, I think, you might disagree, more and more prevalent. Societal and political commentary. And more often than not, they don't utilize humor. No arms or legs. They turned the man into a log before sending him home. No arms or legs. They turned the man into a log before sending him home. And that's Tsuru Akira, translated by Ueda. Back to school special on flak jackets and masks. Back to school special on flak jackets and masks. Lorraine A. Padden, from her book Upwelling. And a very, very frightening picture there, I think, of what society has become. Salt and pepper. I colour my hair before signing in on Tinder. Salt and pepper. I colour my hair before signing in on Tinder. Vandana Parashar, from her book I Am. Third age. Thinking now that maybe two were enough. Third age. Thinking now that maybe two were enough. M.R. Pelletier, from Failed Haiku, issue 97. Family picnic. An uncle shows me his hidden snake. Family picnic. An uncle shows me his hidden snake. Another of Vandana Parashar's poems from her book I Am. Undocumented. A man without a planet. Undocumented. A man without a planet. By Cynthia Anderson. And that was Prune Juice's best of issue for issue 47. At the beginning of the podcast, I asked, should we separate haiku from senryu? And if so, how do we define the senryu? It might come as no surprise to you that I'm not ready to answer those questions yet, but join me for the rest of the series and see if I can by the end. And of course, if you have any thoughts on these questions, write and tell me. It's always very valuable to get your thoughts as I go along. So that's it for today. Together, we've taken a look at some of the different types of senryu. And I wondered, was it a surprise to discover they weren't always intended to be funny? But what strikes me as I continue with my research is the way the same debates seem to resurface time and again. At times, I honestly wonder if I'm simply reinventing the wheel. Before we finish, I have a little mission for you, should you choose to accept it. Would you think about ways you might support the work of Poetry P? You could become a member. You could treat us to a coffee and maybe even a bicky to go with it. You could spread the word on social media. A sprinkle of your fairy dust goes a long, long way, much further than I can sprinkle it on my own. You could volunteer to lend a hand, because rest assured, I will always find something for you to do. And maybe don't let me do all the talking. Is there something you'd really like to get out there into the wide world on the topic of Japanese short forms in English? Or have you written a book? Do you want to read us some poetry? Get in touch. And don't forget, if you're listening or watching this in real time, there's only one day left to send in your tanka. Yeah, only one, I know. Time flies. And of course, Anna Yin is eagerly awaiting your responses to the YouTube prompt this month. Just remember, you can leave as many poems as you like in the comments on YouTube. And you could find your work featured in a podcast or in a journal. But this is important. Don't send an email to me with your contribution. Got to be in the comments. Right, time for me to go. I'm going to have a look and see what's happening in the garden. No doubt my magnificent magnolia has dropped another mountain of leaves for me to rake. But on the bright side, they'll make a fine leaf mould in the end, nourishing the herbs and vegetables to come. So until next week, keep writing. And do check out the show notes. Ciao!